No, it's Washington, D.C. I'm sitting in my office.
Oh, okay, in the center of power.
Yes, 16th Street, and 16th Street goes straight down to the White House, which is at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, and the presidential motorcade goes up and down the street, and yesterday we all thought we had to run into the basement because fighter jets came over very, very low for the first time in years to greet the Polish president.
Oh, okay. They sure wanted to make an impression then of foreign visitors.
Apparently.
Apparently. Yeah, for sure. Well, first of all, Ingrid, warmly welcome to the interview with Nya Dagbladet. We are very honored and pleased to have you here. We recently reported about the heartbreaking treatment of goats in relation to the Kashmir industry based on Peta's press release, and we were very delighted and honored when we were offered an interview with you. So welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, and thank you for doing that piece, because I think that woke a lot of people up to what's wrong with buying things that come from animals' backs involuntarily. And
also, warm congratulations on your Jubilee birthday. You're celebrating 70 this year, and 40 years as an activist. Do I understand that correctly?
At least 40 years. 40 years with Peta, but I was an activist before I formed the group. It doesn't feel like 70. I can tell you I'm very lucky. I'm a vegan, I'm healthy, so far, touch wood. And I just want to work as vigorously and as quickly as I can and get a lot done before I leave you.
And you mentioned a little bit about that you had been an activist even before that. So why don't we start a little bit about your early beginnings? If you can tell us about your background. How come you chose this life path and ended up to work for animals? Can you share us a little bit about the background even before Peta, so to say, and what happened then in your early years? How came you got involved?
Well, some people are born appreciating art or being musical or something. I just always cared about animals. When I was born, there was already a dog in the house named Shawnee, and he was like a brother to me. So we went everywhere together, we did everything, we understood each other, we slept in the same bed, either in my bed or in his dog bed, and we went in the car together. We both got car sick at the same time. And so I loved him with all my heart. And I grew up thinking that there was no difference between him and a human child, a human brother. So when I was older, I lived in India from the time I was 7. And there you can see animals on the street, and they're in very bad condition. There are bulls and cattle being beaten, donkeys pulling carts, and stray dogs who have physical ailments, mange and starvation. My mother helped Mother Teresa's orphans in Delhi, Old Delhi, and the Calcutta riots, the unwed mothers. She did a lot of human charity work, but she always stopped the car if there was an animal in need, and those animals sang to me. Their story really resonated with me, and I promised when I grow up I'll do something important for animals. And then I became a teenager, forgot about it, just concentrated on boys and having a good time. But later I remembered, and I started very simply working in a kennel in a humane society, an SPCA, and trying to make it a better place, a kinder, gentler place for animals. And from there, became a law enforcement officer, went out and was a deputy sheriff, and arrested people for various things, including cruelty to animals, and started working full-time to stop animal abuse, and formed Peta in 1980.
What is Peta, and what kind of activism, what kind of activity are you involved in? For our audience, please explain a little bit.
Well, when I first started, I thought looking out for animals meant that you made sure they had water, they had food, that nobody hit them or didn't attach firecrackers to their tail or anything horrible like that. But in 1978, I read a book by Peta called Animal Liberation. And it changed my life because he set out very clearly the idea that perhaps animals aren't here for us just to treat kindly within the context of using them for our own needs, but perhaps there are other nations like ours, there are other tribes, and we need to get over ourselves. We need to stop being supremacists because we're humans, we have power, we have money, we have everything at our fingertips, and think about all the other living beings as being just like us, feeling fear and pain and joy and wanting their freedom the way we do, but being enslaved or put down, or people feeling that they were less because they have amazing talents. Animals can do extraordinary things that we can't, and even if they couldn't, they still feel. They have a heart, they have eyes, they have thoughts, they have emotions, and we should respect them. So that changed my life, and I thought, I'm going to start a group. And people then, in 1980, didn't know if you stop eating animals, what can you eat? So nowadays, you go to the supermarket, you can buy this massive array of vegan foods and vegan milks and vegan cheeses. Then there was nothing. So I thought, I'm going to do the homework, make sure people know how cruel these industries are, and then show them what they can do that makes the transition easy for clothing, for food, for entertainment, and everything you buy that might have been, animals might have died in a laboratory to test. So I did.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned your legal background there. Is that what Peta also focuses mainly on, the legal aspects, or are you also involved in a broader sense of activism with the organization?
We do bring lawsuits. For example, we have one now against an egg producer who keeps chickens in factory conditions, but puts the label on the egg carton that shows green fields, happy hens, and says cage-free. But the hens' lives are miserable. People are buying with good intentions, and we have brought a consumer lawsuit, consumer fraud. So we do things like that, and we bring out government records from laboratories so that we can find wrongdoing, illegal activity within the laboratories. But more than that, we are grassroots because we know that it's really, government is slow to act and agencies are slow to act, but you, yourself, you and we can do things immediately. You can look at what you're having for breakfast, look at what your coat you're going to buy and shoes you're going to buy, look at the shampoo you're going to use, do all these things and just make a kind choice. And immediately, if enough people do it, the marketplace shifts. Even if you're a tourist, we send out information saying, look at how the elephant babies are taken from their mothers, beaten to train them. They spend their life in chains, except when they're giving rides to tourists in India, in Thailand, and so on. And so people go on holiday, they still make kind choices and say, I'm not going to ride an elephant. I'm not going to have my photograph taken with a tiger or a parrot. I'm not going to buy a souvenir that comes from an animal. It's all activism, individual, human-led change.
So one might say as well that you put equal emphasis on leading by example as well, that you sort of try to show practical ways for people how to change or be inspired.
Yes, absolutely. We are all about two things. One is we do the undercover investigations. So we go into places the average person who's out shopping, for example, has never seen. could never even imagine how cruel it is behind the scenes. And we show the videos, show the photographs, give the facts, but always part two is, so reject that and please consider this. Here are your options, your alternatives. So today you have every kind of material you could possibly ever want, that instead of fur, instead of real wool, instead of cow's leather, and some of it you don't even know if it's cow's leather, because as we've shown, in China they're killing dogs off the street. They don't label it dog leather. They export it. People think it's cow leather. So we tell people the facts, and then we say, here are the wonderful options you have. The world now is full of options, from pineapple leather and mushroom leather and everything you could imagine, to everything you could eat, and every cosmetic, every single thing.
Mm-hmm. And to get back a little bit about the early beginnings of Peta, you have today, if I understand it right, around 400 or 500 employees, right?
Yes, we have about 480.
Yeah, and a great international impact as well. And if you look at the early beginnings to where you are today, what has been your approach when building up this organization? To ask this, like, what kind of advice you would like to give to new generations of leaders who want to build an impactful organization? How has your own reasoning and approach been when building up Peta?
Well, I don't think you look for money first, take the money and do something. I believe you do everything you can first. And if people see that you're successful or you're earnest or you're striving to make a change, they'll come and support you. And then you grow. So I'm very grateful to every single person who ever did anything. If they gave 1 hour a week, that's wonderful. If they gave us some reduced fee printing, I'm grateful. So it's more about everybody knowing their potential too. So when someone comes to help us, we make sure to say, you're now a messenger in your community. Speak to your parents, speak to your relatives, speak to your friends and the people where you work. Speak to your clubs. Show a film. Put things on social media. Spread it everywhere you can, because we have to grow, grow, grow. And so I love the fact that people come in because they care perhaps about a dog. You know, they may not, or they don't like fur, they think it's wrong, but they don't see the whole picture. And as soon as we can, we say, please try to think, it's not just this dog, it's not just this animal killed for fur. It's they all feel, they all need you, and they all need you to take the magazines, take the videos, go out there and talk to other people about it, and let's grow this movement. Because most people, I really believe this, most people will be kind if you show them how, if you give them the facts.
Mm-hmm. So do I understand it right then, that you think that this idealistic sense has been an important reason why Peta has managed to even exist for such a long time and grow to where it is today?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, a lot of people now are going vegan because of the environment. They know that you cannot sustain animal-based agriculture simply for the amount of water it uses, or the pesticides, or the deforestation. But more than the people who are going vegan for environmental reasons, and that applies to clothing too, by the way, not just food, or for health reasons, you see a lot of older people particularly, they have a heart attack, or they have a heart incident, or they have diabetes, or they're getting overweight, and their doctor says, you know, try a vegan diet. So you see all this change happening. But mostly you see young people who always have led everybody else, whether it was the environment or children's rights, anything, women's rights. The young people don't understand when you have these choices why you would be slaughtering all these billions of animals in the world, taking them when they're minding their own business and frightening them, putting them on a truck, slitting their throats, taking their skin. Young people are appalled by that. And so these generations coming up are going to help enormously, and they do it from the heart. And I think most people, if they are decent, they're kind. And if they're kind, they're going to understand, perhaps slowly, but they'll understand that there's something wrong with bullying and exploiting and slaughtering and harming others simply because they weren't born human.
Mm. You mentioned a little bit about young people and new generations there, and anybody listening who is a young person and is an activist or want to become an activist in any sort of field, what would you say? What are the main keys, in your opinion, to efficient activism?
Well, I believe that I take a lot of lessons from the fact that it took me a while to understand who animals are, not what, but who. Because at 19, I had a fur coat. My father and I think we almost ate our way through the animal kingdom. He was a gourmand, so he loved to have all sorts of exotic meats. So gradually I learned things because I saw how animals suffer. And I would say to young people, be true to your heart. You know, remember, give people a little bit of room. Don't criticize them heavily if they just are doing what they grew up doing. Just educate them, give them the facts, help them, cook for them, provide them food, show them what to buy. Be gentle, but be firm, because there is no excuse, once you know, for not changing, but help people change. But be active. You know, never leave the house, I never do, without bumper stickers, leaflets, everything, because if you're going somewhere, you can leave one. If I fly, I put them in the back of the seats on the airplane or the train. I leave them in an office. I put them in the magazine racks in the supermarket. And people write and they call and they say, not necessarily the ones I put there, but the ones so many other people put there. Oh, it changed my life. I saw this. I read this. I had no idea. Thank you. Now I will do something else.
Mm-hmm. If I understand it right, your office is placed in Washington, right? Washington, D.C.
One of them, yes.
Yeah. One of them, yeah. You have offices all around the world. But is it the main office that is in Washington, right?
Actually, no. The main office is we have two main offices. East coast of U.S. is in Norfolk, Virginia, the naval base. If you see any military ships on the news, you're looking at Norfolk, Virginia. And then the other one is Los Angeles, Angeles, California.
Thanks for clarifying that. I just wanted to ask a question about lobbyism. If the office is that close to in Washington, you surely have some experience about that. I wanted to add in your experiences on lobby. What is an effective perspective on that for activists?
It's not our key issue because we are more grassroots. We're more the man at the bus stop, the person, the student, somebody, the career person, whatever. We're about individual activism more than that. But yes, we're busy on Capitol Hill, and in fact, the United States Congress has done some good things. It's taken a lot of work, but we have got them to stop the United States Coast Guard, for instance, from using animals in training exercises. And in the Nordic countries, that's still going on with the military, and I think people can get involved there and stop it too.
And as we speak about activism as well, this interesting question that activists often get confronted with regarding moral and legal questions, for example, when it comes to civil disobedience. What has been your general approach how to decide what acts to do and what not to do? Can you maybe share some story or experience with our audience which made you ask these difficult questions to yourself?
Well, yes. I mean, nobody wants to go to jail. Nobody wants to be arrested, really. And if you don't have to be, then don't. But anyone who criticizes people who sit down in front of a fur store and are dragged away, or who go into a laboratory and say, these dogs, you're not going to poison them. I'm going to stay here until this stops. Anybody who does that kind of action is giving a little bit of themselves. And if anyone criticizes them, my point is, what are you doing legally to try to stop this? Because don't criticize unless you are doing everything you can, meeting your legislators, writing letters, calling into radio shows, whatever you can do, educating others, showing the videos. So don't criticize people who take this extra action, which, by the way, of course, has that wonderful word civil attached to it, meaning polite. It's me. I'm sitting here in protest, and I have been arrested dozens of times and have sat in jail for sometimes 2 weeks at a time because I won't pay bail. And I want you to know I'm there, and you can, realize why I'm there. So I think it's a good thing. One arrest we had was I spent 15 days in jail in Pennsylvania for interrupting a pigeon shoot. They round up the birds in a city because they consider them nuisances. I think, more people are nuisances than pigeons. And then they take them to a field and let them go. And as they're let out of the boxes, people shoot at them. And a lot of people shoot them in the wing or the leg, and they fall to the ground, and they're dying and in pain. And so friends and I from Peta rush onto the field, and then they have to stop shooting. They might not if they know it's us, but they do. And then we go to jail and we sit there. We did that 2 years in a row, each time 15 days. And in the end, we actually sued the prison for conditions in the prison, which were awful. And they stopped the pigeon shoot because it was too expensive for them to continue having to defend it. So it's useful sometimes.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned here regarding that you've been in jail at times. If you look back on your long career when it comes to building Peta and when it comes to activist actions, do you have any regrets or things that you would do differently today with the long experience you have? I mean, 40 years looking back. If you look back on the career, what would you think about that? Is there anything you would do differently today?
There are lots of things I would do differently. And I would start with being born more intelligent and being born earlier so I had more time. But yes, I mean, I've been very impatient, and sometimes that's good. I think you should be impatient, but not always. And sometimes I've been way too impatient with people whose work was not up to snuff, who perhaps had some personal problems and weren't able to produce. I also erred on the side of hiring people because I thought they were nice. And that sounds very strange, perhaps. But if you are not running a charity as a business, you are not going to get things done. And so just because someone likes animals shouldn't mean they automatically have a job in your organization, because perhaps they aren't as good as somebody else who could get the job done for animals quicker or more efficiently. And you take that, for example, with lawyers. I always try to hire animal rights lawyers. But you also have to look at, I know you like animals, I know you care about this issue and you understand it, but how good a lawyer are you? Because how awful to end up having to fire them. And that's a terrible thing when you have to fire somebody kind because you made a bad hiring mistake and you went with your personal interests, your personal relationship with them, your understanding of their feelings, rather than their talents, abilities, and so on, because we have a job to do. That's the number one thing I've learned.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. From the other side then, if you look back on your many actions and campaigns over the years, what would you see as your greatest success story? I guess it's hard to pick one, but maybe you have some favorite that you would like to share to your audience.
Well, funny enough, and it's wonderful to say, we have victories every week. So every week there's something to celebrate, but the enormity of the cruelty to animals in the world sort of puts a chill on that, because you know how much more work there has to be done. One of my favorite victories is that car companies all over the world used to test their steering wheels and their crashes on animals. They would put a pig or a baboon in a chair in a laboratory on a track, and they would make this chair zoom down the track and smash into a wall. or into a fake car front. And the animals, of course, were always injured, killed, and so on. We campaigned so vigorously internationally. We always start off by writing to the company politely, trying to meet, offering our scientists, we have a lot of scientists with us, offering to help find alternatives. They ignored it. Every car company ignored it. Mercedes was the only car company not doing these tests. So we escalated and we started protesting, and then we started interrupting auto shows, and then we started getting donated cars of whatever brand it was and breaking them up outside the auto show covered with slogans about animal tests being cruel. And when they still didn't listen to us, we started burning cars. Can you imagine? Outside auto showrooms. And that got their attention. They were our cars that people had given us for this purpose because the experiments upset them so much, but we set fire to them. And finally, one by one, the car companies came to us and said, all right. And that's why if you are watching a commercial, an advertisement, you see a mannequin, you see a computerized mannequin in the car saying our car is safe. That's because they no longer use animals. So that was one of our biggest international victories.
Yeah, good example there. From the more critical side, when people think about animal rights or animal welfare activism, do you think that in some cases that it can go too far? For example, one occurring question to me, for example, when it comes to farming and vegetarianism, veganism as an example, is there an argument to be made today to, for example, encourage farms and farmers that take well care of their animals and discourage those that treat them horribly rather than condemn all livestock farming altogether, so to speak? Are there nuances like these that are to be made that animal rights activists sometimes can risk to miss, in your opinion? What do you think about that?
I don't think that that's accurate, because the extreme thing to me is that we think we want to eat the flesh of another living being, or the ova of another living being, or the secretions, like milk, of a mother who made those for her baby. That to me is extreme, that we would see a goat or a sheep and think, oh, I want what you're wearing, I'm going to take it. And it's the 21st century when we have choices and they have none. But that said, any improvement is better than no improvement. And having 2 feet of square feet of space for a hen is better than 1 square feet, but it's not good enough. You know, not hitting them or electroshocking them as they go onto the truck, the lorry to go to the abattoir is better than smashing them in the backside or the nose. But these are small things. It's making it less cruel by small degrees. And my challenge is to say to people, hang on a minute, I grew up eating this stuff too, wearing these things too, but I realize we don't need them. We're not cannibals, we're not survivalists, we're not cave people. We now have this wealth of choices in front of us. Let's leave the animals alone, please. They don't want to be afraid, and they don't want to die. They don't want to feel this pain. They don't want to worry about things. They want their families. They want their freedom. Leave them off your plate. Leave them off your back and your feet, and just stop bullying and oppressing them.
Follow-up question to that, with your long perspective on the animal rights movement, when you have been involved for 4 years and looking back on it, do you have anything that you have noted that has had the opposite or like a negative impact, maybe sometimes unintentionally or something like that? But do you see that something that has not worked out or has not worked out in a constructive way? That would be interesting to have your take on it, because you have watched this development for so long.
Well, you know, you hear a lot about this because, for example, on our Facebook or a Twitter account, a lot of people who are hunters, for example, are very angry with us because we criticize hunting for sport, for fun. And they will shoot a lot of rabbits, and they will spell out the name Peta in rabbit bodies and send us the photograph. And you get other people will send us animal organs in the mail, or they will write on Twitter, because of what you did, say, putting up a memorial to remind people on the road that a chicken truck overturned here, or a pig truck overturned here, and animals died, on their way to slaughter. Please think about going vegan. They'll be so angry. They'll say, because of this, I'm eating 2 hamburgers tonight, or I'm cooking an extra chicken. But it's rubbish, because in the end, even if you don't like the messages, that you're defensive about the messages, you try to reject the messages, everyone who has said people will never do that, in the end, there are enough messages that it gets through to people, and they do end up changing. I say there are no non-vegans, there are only pre-vegans.
To connect back to what you mentioned here a little bit about different parts of the world, you said mentioned here that you grew up in India, and when you have been traveling around the world, are there some positive and negative example that you would mention that you have experienced where animals are treated better and also treated for worse? What would you say about that?
I think every country is a little bit different, but at the bottom of it all, people are all the same. So you can always pull out the kindness in people, unless they are like Attila the Hun, they're completely cold in their heart, psychotic almost. So everybody all over the world, when I'm in India, for example, one day I was in a taxi crossing a bridge, and a lot of poor people live on the streets, as you know, and there was a woman with a long skirt and a baby, and she lived on a piece of cardboard on this street. And as I watched, we were stuck in traffic. She stood up and she looked down the bridge, and I couldn't see from where I was what she was looking for, but she was staring down, and then up comes this mother dog, skinny as can be, just all her bones showing. She walked along the bridge. The woman reached into the hem of her long skirt, and she pulled out a piece of paper, undid it, and inside she had a little rice ball. I couldn't tell what was in it, and she put it on the cardboard, on the paper, and she stood there and she guarded that dog while that dog ate. That woman had nothing, and yet she had a kind heart, which is everything. And yet I've seen people in other countries, they'll say, how can you eat dogs? How can you eat monkeys? And they'll say, well, how can you eat pigs and chickens? People, all over the world there are cultural differences, things you've grown up with, taking for granted as being normal. And someone may say, excuse me, isn't there another way to do that? But it's not a nationalistic thing. And, I think that in some countries there are better laws, but at the bottom of it, we need more than better laws, because the laws are so small, they're so weak, and they still allow the overall exploitation and suffering of millions of animals. So we need to take personal responsibility wherever we live.
And as we talked before in Nordic audience today, what is your judgment, maybe from both a positive and negative side? How do the Nordic countries stand in an international comparison historically and at this point of time? What would you say in your opinion or impression?
Well, again, I think there are good and bad things. As I understand it, something like almost 80%, I think it's 78% of Swedish people are against fur farming. That's changed over the years. Fur farming used to be really important in Sweden and other Nordic countries. It was, I think, made illegal 2001, and then chinchilla farming 2014 maybe, and there are still farms for rabbits. But the majority of the people now say we don't want fur farming. And the young people in Nordic countries, whereas in the old days, not so long ago, it was so common to see fur everywhere. A lot of the young people just say, I don't want it. I would rather be seen dead than in fur. But Sweden also was the first country, unfortunately, to popularize Canada goose, which is a big problem internationally. Mm-hmm. We are campaigning against not only the coyote fur that they trap in Canada, so it is an international matter, mm-hmm. and was not only worn in the James Bond film by an English actor, but is sold all over China and America, is full of down feathers. And we have been to the farms where the geese are crammed into these boxes, some of them suffocate, thrown onto the trucks, and we have seen the steel traps that these coyotes are caught in, where they're desperate, the mothers, to get back to their dens for their babies, and all of them in great pain from the steel that's eating into their paw. So Sweden, unfortunately, was the first country to make Canada goose a fashion statement. And Sweden, for example, and the Nordic countries are slow on the uptake when it comes to going vegan, but the number is increasing. And so I think the Nordic countries are very concerned about carbon footprint. They're ahead of other countries in Europe and in the Americas in being environmentally conscious. And so, it's wonderful. And you make wonderful foods. You've got Oatly and Oomph, which came from, I hope I'm saying Oomph properly, that came from Sweden, which we thank you for, because we love Oatly. We don't know Oomph over here, but I heard about it. And now IKEA has made vegan meatballs, which we publicized internationally. So it's all over the world. They have different things, but everybody's trying if they're kind.
Mm. A last question that you already mentioned it a bit there when talking from an international perspective, and you've been traveling around the world. How would you say, like, different perspectives on animals? Like, for example, that in the Nordic countries and Western countries, we have traditionally eaten pigs, and we see that as livestock. But in other countries like China, they have different perspectives on that. Is there something interesting to note about this cultural differences on animals in a broader context?
Yes, I think that is interesting. China, of course, they also eat a lot of pigs, but it's interesting because China was the first country as a Buddhist country to develop meats that were not from animals. And now Chinese companies are developing synthetic materials to replace fur and leather. So their trade is very big in non-animal products, but they also eat a lot of pigs. We do have problems in Vietnam, in the Philippines, with people eating monkeys, but I always say, it doesn't really matter who they're eating. It's the fact that all of these living beings do not want to be eaten. In India, for example, people say, isn't India all vegetarian? No. At one point back in time, they used to be. Now, India looks to the West and thinks, the young people think, I should eat animals, maybe even cows. And so we are there saying, actually, the West is turning the other way and going more to an environmentally conscious, health-conscious, animal-friendly diet. You're going in the wrong direction. Turn around and see we're coming into your country. And in India now today, for years, animals have pulled trucks and they've pulled carts and they have been overloaded. And we're there helping people and animals by helping bring in eco-tractors and saying, you don't have to beat this animal to carry this heavy load. Let's help you with a low-interest loan, and we'll have animals out of the picture. We'll help you retire them to our sanctuary, and you can have an eco-tractor and make more money. And so we're helping people change the ways that things were done so that it's more humane. Animals, people, everybody.
You mentioned a very interesting thing there regarding synthetic meat. What is your perspective on that? I mean, there are critical voices about it regarding the risks of genetic manipulation and so on, or while others say it's a positive thing that can replace livestock farming and almost be regarded as a vegan phenomenon or something like that. But what is your perspective or opinion on synthetic meat specifically?
Well, I don't know about synthetic. I would change the wording a little bit, because there are two main kinds of substitutes for flesh, and or cow's flesh, where you use or any other flesh, where you use a slaughterhouse. One is you make it in a laboratory from the animal's own cells. So all you do, it's not genetic manipulation, it's the actual cells that you grow in a test tube, you grow on a scaffold, you grow in a mushroom or other medium, and you make it bigger so that you have a steak or you have a piece of fish or whatever it is you're growing, but it's real meat. That stuff is real meat. There's nothing synthetic about it. The only thing you get rid of is the bacteria, the feces, the filth, the water use, all the things that you don't have to send cattle to have their throats slit, hang them up, nothing. It's all in a laboratory, but it's real meat. So suffering is gone, environmental problems are gone, disease risk is gone, but it's not genetic engineered. Then the other one is, and by the way, years ago, we started funding that. I spoke to a Dutch scientist, a Professor van Eelen, maybe 22 years ago, and we started little seed money for that. And now it's in Israel, it's in Australia, it's all over. They're growing it. But the other thing is taste-alikes. Something that tastes like meat but isn't meat. It's made from plants. So there's no cholesterol, lots of fiber, and you don't have the carcinogenic cancer-causing properties that you have in real meat. So both of them are healthier, more environmentally friendly, and certainly both of them eliminate cruelty 100%. So genetic stuff is different, and you can genetically engineer, of course, vegetables. You can mess around with the genes of animals. I don't like any of it. I don't think any of it's necessary. I think it could be dangerous, but in vitro meat, lab meat, or taste-alikes, excellent.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting perspectives. And now, while you have the chance here before a Swedish and Scandinavian audience, is there any final words you would like to add or tell a Scandinavian audience?
Well, I would love to come and see you. That's what I would like to say.
You're certainly welcome.
Thank you so much. I think my message to a Scandinavian audience is almost the same as it would be to anyone anywhere else, which is we are all learning. We are all looking to be good people. We all want to be the kind of people we would tell our children to be. And to look out, don't be afraid that animal rights is such an all-encompassing philosophy of harmlessness, of doing no harm to others, and of respecting others. Just if one thing moves you, just go and do that one thing. Change that one thing, but keep moving on the journey step by step. And if you need anything, Peta, our organization, will help you in any way to mentor, to provide leads to things, tips, recipes, anything you want. If we can help, we are happy to help you.
Mm. And to round up, what can we expect to see from Peta during the coming 10 years until your next jubilee? What is upcoming?
Well, we have already closed the largest circus in the world, Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey, and I hope to close all the animal circuses before I die, and I believe that will happen. I also think there is this vegan revolution that's happening, and today in the United Kingdom, Kentucky Fried Chicken, KFC, introduced its first chicken burger. So I hope to see much, much more of that. And most important of all, Holland has said that they are going to stop all use of animals within the next 8 or so years in laboratory experiments. I hope that happens, but worldwide, technology replacing monkeys and mice and rats and rabbits and dogs and cats in laboratories. That is on our agenda. We're fighting very hard for it. Lots of our scientists involved producing alternatives to animal use. It can happen. Just need the incentive.
Well, thank you so much, Ingrid, for the interview, and we wish you all the best of luck.
Thank you so much for doing this, and I'll talk to you in 10 years.